amazing. Fascinating. Welcome to Finchale Abbey, a fascinating panorama of history, both Roman, medieval, Neolithic. What will the future hold? Let me introduce you to some of these ruins. Here we are in the granary. Bread kept here, grain here, and a small monk, no taller than 5 foot, would sit pounding the grain into bread. Welcome to the auditorium. Monks would sit here and on the lower step, much as I will do now. And they would enjoy performing artists, such as jugglers, trapezium artists, fire breathers, and singing boy bands. Here we are in the armoury, where the monks kept their weapons ready for a fight with other local tribes. Grain was stored here. Here we are now in the dormitorium, where the monks would sleep. They would walk in, lit only by candlelight, singing as they did. Ah. I will now introduce Ed Gibbs, a specialist in monks' sleeping habits. Ed.
Thank you, Michael. Here we have one of these splendidly preserved sleeping pods of the monks. In the 16th century, the monks would used to sleep in positions similar to this. The nature of human evolution means that back in the 16th century, monks were a great deal smaller than I am now. Therefore, a pod like this would typically hold between 3 and 4 monks.
Here we are now in the library, where the monks would come to read, to revise, to ponder. Books stored here and here. If you imagine a shelf running from here to here, also storing books. In times of famine, these walls would house storage of grain, a small hollow used for making bread. I'll now introduce Ed.
I am here seated in a typical 16th century recital chair used by the monks. In this position, the monks would survey the library and the views to my left here, and they would read classics of the time, such as Benedictum Benedictat Benedictus, a favourite of the 16th century, and they would ponder the great ideas of theology, philosophy, and other intelligent ponderings.
The monks also kept many animals in the library, such as budgerigars and pandas. This hollow would hold a baby panda to the age of 6 months, before it would move into the area in which Edward is lying, the panda pen.
Here I am in the panda pen. It is a little known fact that in the latter part of the 15th century, giant pandas were imported to the northeast of England from mainland China. They thrived in this environment, where they were able to move away from their natural diet of bamboo to the delicacies that the monks produced, as Michael pointed out earlier on, such as the bread that they crafted.
I am now exiting the cloakroom, where the monks would store their cloaks. Brown, black, red, purple, green and brown. cloaks of wool and silk that would be used for various purposes, some for sleeping, some for praying, some for exercising. Edward is an expert on the use of cloaks in monk history.
Hello there. I have just come through to the cloakroom from the monks' exercise chamber, where they use the aforementioned cloaks to wrestle with each other, to stretch each other's physical and mental ability. Here we have said exercising chamber. They would take the strongest monks and tie them to these pillars. Then the monks would be tasked with breaking free from their bindings. Here we see the aftermath of one of the strongest monks, Tarquinius Hempum Stempum, who broke free from his bindings and pulled the central pillar from its foundations.
The exercise in this chamber was not only restricted to the human monks, also their horses. Small chariots would be raced in this fashion, anti-clockwise around the pillars, much like a smaller hippodrome from Roman times. It is said that the influence of the Romans greatly influenced the monks' exercise regime, and they partook in Greco-Roman Olympic sports such as discus throwing, chariot racing, naked wrestling, and the javelin.
The monks would also have to be incredibly agile and athletic, as I have just demonstrated here. That is a task which is not so easily said as it is done.
Here we are in the refectory, where the monks can enjoy delicate food after long days of praying. Friday was Chinese day, and they would enjoy sweet and sour pork and bread made in the granary. As you can see, the concrete floor, one of the first of its kind, brewed from a mixture of grain from the granary and sand taken from the River Were to my left and east. It was laid down in the 13th century before concrete was used widespread in 1960s infrastructure. Ed is an expert in monk concrete making.
This really is fascinating. Here we can see the remnants of the monks' concrete making implements. This, as I mentioned earlier, belonged to the monks who then were much smaller. This would be a mortar and pestle implement. Interestingly here, we can also see some aspects of wildlife. For example, here we have remnants of seaweed. Now this is very interesting. This would be deposited by seabirds flying in from the coast in Sunderland, approximately 15 miles away, and they would drop their seaweed takings on the floor in the refectory, and the monks would polish them up after their main course.
Amazing.
Fascinating.
I can hear the echoes of 16th century monks walking. Their pace is quickened.
Fascinating.